All right, so we are live. And hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Rocks Talks. I'm Perizaad.
I'm Faizeh.
And this week we thought we would talk to folk. Oh, God, this is going to be bright. Hello, I'm lit.
I'm trying to make sure that I don't have the well, you can keep talking.
Yeah. So this week we decided we would talk about slut shaming and belly dance because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big deal amongst belly dancers themselves and also instructors. And so we thought we'd talk about that a little bit.
You're so much better. I am like really washed out, but you're lit really beautifully. And I'm like blasted.
Well, it's worse because like I accidentally overdrew my lips and I already have anime eyes. If I overdraw my lips, I just look completely cartoonish. So I'm like, I just like, hello, I am here to talk about I just feel like really.
Well, you look really pretty. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
That wasn't slut
talking.
shaming. That wasn't slut shaming, by the way. That was plastic surgery shaming, I guess. I don't know. That was probably not good anyway. Anyway, no shame. Slut shaming and belly dance. I mean, it's hard because the thing is like I feel like, you know, as a society in America, we're already trying to still come to terms with it. And then we're also as Westerners, we're also participating in a culture that already has some conservative views on female roles in society. So it's one of those things where it's like I mean, slut shaming is bad for sure. And in America, like, you know, we should definitely with each other not be doing it. But I think there's also the problem where we come to a crossroads where we're also keeping on like our morality and attaching it to their culture. Because that was one of the things, you know, when I was talking to one of our dear friends, she was talking about when she first started doing shabi and she was dancing to Mahagana, and she was saying that one of the main issues people had was that a lot of moves she was doing were boy moves. It wasn't so much that she was dancing to Mahagana, it was that she was dancing like a man while in a while in a Rakshaki costume. They were like, or like in a baladi or a galabea or like something like that. And they were just like, what are you doing? Just knock it off, because they happen to have very, very strict, they have a very coded, like gender coded culture. So it's just one of the things is like that we come up against with belly dance is like, and this is the thing, this is why it has to be a conversation, is because, you know, we're coming to terms with our own ideas about gender roles and how gender plays a part or doesn't in our society, but we can't just automatically like, and therefore you should like to this other society.
Well, this goes along with my very first Rocks on the Rocks that I did a year ago. And that was like, we have our own, like you said, we're coming to terms with these things, but also we can't be imposing our what we think is appropriate or inappropriate onto another culture. And if we're borrowing from a culture or outright stealing from another culture, then that makes that whole thing even stickier, because, you know, if when I was talking about it, I was talking about racism and that kind of thing, but it's, you know, recent discussions in the belly dance community have kind of brought up the whole, you know, slut shaming kind of thing. But, you know, our Western culture really wants to just stamp onto us what belly dancing is. And that in itself is a problem, because it's totally rooted in, a lot of it, I should say, is rooted in just these Orientalist fantasies. And you know, it's hard, because on the one hand, if something is acceptable in the culture of origin, like, for example, you know, I am really starting to gravitate towards Turkish style dance. It's just, it's always been my style, but because AMCAB is my style, I've just kind of kept it as this kind of vague, I knew that was the what was informing AMCAB was more Turkish style than Egyptian style. But as I grow, I'm like, I really enjoy Turkish style. Anyway, that being said, when you look at the costuming of Turkish dancers for the last 70 years, they're very they can be really revealing. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's
I mean, even the modern costumes that I'm seeing on dancers who are working in Egypt right now, you're all familiar with them. I'm a pearl clutcher. I'm an old biddy at heart, even though I'm like just about 30. But like to me, they look more like a hip scarf than a costume. But I mean, like that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I just know that for me personally, and part of it too is like I wouldn't feel comfortable dancing in that, but that's me and my hangups about how I look. But these girls look fine, and nobody's having a problem. And it's so interesting because in Egypt, like they're going back and forth. Like on the one hand, there are the girls that are wearing the triangle, like the triangle skirts that basically hit the knee with a lot of fringe, and then had like a lot of strappies on the opposite side to like hold it together. And then there are the girls that are wearing the modesty shorts with absolutely everything. And it's been really interesting to see how the different costuming is coming out right now. But I mean, they're both legitimate costumes. They both cover what they need to cover. It's just, it's a preference thing. And I prefer long flowing skirts.
I prefer long skirts as well. And you've been in my class, and one of the things that I try to reiterate to my students is whatever you do is going to affect all other belly dancers everywhere. And so that is still something that I think that all dancers should keep in mind until, people stop just, I saw this dancer do this, so now all dancers are like that, But
I was talking to Laura Lyle about this, and she was joking that because she had wanted to study musical theater going into college, and so she's a little bit jealous of me because of my theater background, my theater degree. Yeah, she's like, yeah, I really wanted to study musical theater, but my parents really like put the kibosh on that early, so instead I was studying biology. But then she went to UCSB and she studied with Alexandra King, as she did the whole her whole belly dance program with the UCSB Middle East Ensemble. And so I'm like, great. So instead of being a theater person, you became a stripper slash well, because a lot of people associate us like they're just like either like terrorist sympathizer, like and she could have just been a musical theater person. So, but I mean, but this is the thing is like, not only does like when we go out into the world and we're dancing to Middle Eastern music and we're wearing Middle Eastern costuming and everything like that. So not only does everything that we do affect every other belly dancer out there, because people really, really have a strong association with belly dance and sex work. And some belly dancers are sex workers and some of us aren't, but these are things that we have to take into mind. But they also associate everything we do with Middle Eastern culture. So yeah, it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing, like they can be like, wow, I didn't realize like how much I like this music, or like, something like that. Like we can act as ambassadors, but we can also reinforce stereotypes and put people in danger.
Yes. But this is where I feel like, so, I used to get really angry. I mean, this is 20 years ago, back when Buzz was on a bulletin board, and I used to just be like, oh, I hate when they dance like, too sexy, because I'm always fighting against this and la 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 la. And I understand dancers who still feel that way, but at the same time, I feel like if we all supported each other, if all the dancers supported each other, and however they are presenting it, as long as they're not presenting something like I'm still not going to be okay with Western dance being presented as belly dance. That still is going to make me bonkers.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they're presenting an authentic Middle Eastern dance, then we should all just be like, this is not a choice that I would make, or this would make me uncomfortable to do this, but this is authentic dance. This is authentic Middle Eastern dance. And I see that Perizaad is frozen, so I'm going to just keep on talking about this. Yeah, I feel like, and maybe this is the feminist in me, and I'd be interested to hear what other people think about this, or other people's views on this, as long as it's respectful. But I just feel like if we are all supporting each other, then there you are. If we're supporting each other, then it's not us fighting against each other. Instead, like when we're fighting against each other, then we can't present something or show how beautiful it is. Am I making any sense?
I came halfway through that conversation, so like, I like the part that I came in for. That was cool.
So I feel like we should support each other instead of fighting each other.
I mean, it needs to be a conversation for sure. But the thing is, I mean, in light of what happened to prompt our live stream 2 weeks ago, Katie Sahar went on. It was like, there's no sisterhood, there's no community, and this dance is really everybody out for themselves. So I mean, it's never like we're gonna have MECTA again, as MECTA was originally where it was the Middle Eastern Cabaret Dancers Association. It was kind of supposed to be a union where they organized. Like I don't think there's ever gonna be a union.
Middle Eastern dancing culture, by the way.
What?
Middle Eastern Dance and Culture, Middle Eastern Culture and Dance Association.
That's what it became. But it was originally Cabaret Dancers Association, according
I've never heard that.
According to the Fez doc.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, okay. When they first organized. And then, before it was a way for the dancers to organize to get fair pay and to not be treated like sex workers. And Lou Shellaby was one of the very first restaurant owners to sign on to say, yep, I will pay my dancers fair wages. So, of course he was. But, but yeah, so I don't think there's ever going to be like I don't think there's ever going to be a union that says this is what belly dancers do, this is what they don't do, this is what you can expect in a set, this is what's not going to happen, and this is what you're going to pay them. Like, that's never going to happen.
It's certainly not going to happen as long as we're all arguing with each other and just saying, my way is better than your way. We're certainly never going to get to the point of being supportive of each other and being, the quote unquote sisterhood, which I bought into the first 2 or 3 years. And then I was like, yeah.
I bought into it too. I mean, like, that's something that I've been really struggling with, is that it's just like, it's gotten to be so much politics either around, what's culturally appropriating, and like, sometimes what's culturally appropriating, which I mean, it definitely needs to be a conversation. The racism within belly dance needs to be a conversation. I was
gonna say, those are important things to talk about.
But it's just like, but there's so many people who are just like, they're not having conversations.
Yeah.
About it. They're just saying it's this or you're not, or you're done. And it's with them like, I just want to dance, guys. I don't even like dancing anymore. Like, honestly, like I'm hanging out with Laura later this week, and literally all we're gonna do is we're gonna dance. We're just gonna dance. We're just gonna party. Not even full time to like belly dance music. There's gonna be a little bit of salsa, and there's gonna be a little bit of disco because that's what we like too. But we're just gonna dance for the joy of dancing, because I have not felt the joy of dance in a very long time. Just because it's either like, because there's so much pressure on what it is to be a belly dancer. Like, it's like, in order to be a belly dancer, you're Sadie, or you're Dina, or you're not really a belly dancer. And it's like, but that's not even a thing in Egypt. Like, there's so many ways to be a belly dancer. There's so many ways to be like, belly dance is an art form, and there's so many ways to be an artist in other art forms in this country as well. And there's so many ways to be a belly dancer over in the Middle East,
Right.
where they have belly dance. Like, it's like you can, I mean, there's the people that just dance at home with their families at parties. There's the people that go out and they entertain. It's like, you know, we always talk about like the 6-week wonders who dance for 6 weeks and then they go off and say that they're a professional belly dancer. They're technically not wrong. That shit happens all the time in all kinds of art forms. It's a way to be a belly dancer. Is it a way that we like? Not particularly, but it's a way to be a belly dancer. But these are the things. It's like, there's so much going on. And I'm just like a little bit burnt out by it. But the slut shaming needs to fucking stop. Which was supposed to be our original topic.
I
know. Just because, like, I mean, you know, and the thing is too is I feel like one of the big issues that's happening right now is we're seeing the slut shaming happening from a lot of like the master teachers. And it's just like, it's hard.
Yeah. And it's disappointing because some of them were much sexier, like their presentation was much sexier when they were younger. And I'm not saying that they're not still sexy, because heaven forbid we lose our sex appeal. I don't buy into the whole you lose your sex appeal when you hit 40 or I'm in trouble.
Farhan is still hotter than me.
I mean, you know. Anyway, but their presentation was much sexier in the 70s or in the 80s, and now that they themselves are in their 70s or 80s, they don't want to allow that other women, that's what they're feeling. They're feeling their sexuality, and that's what they're sharing. They're sharing, like, I find a lot of my feminine power through that. And that's part of what I want to share. I mean, I don't really go out and present myself in a super sexy way, but that is still something that I'm channeling when I'm performing. And I think it's too bad that women want to monitor where other women feel their power.
But it's not even just women. I mean, you know, a lot of the issue comes from, you know, this was a conversation that was had during was it Khan Zaman? Was that the name of the golden era?
I think so.
That's the Khan Zaman. I mean, they had a fabulous conversation around some of the folkloric teachers who I mean, they're folkloric teachers, and they you know, and they neg on belly dance.
Right.
And how like that, yeah, like how they're negging on belly dance, and like how a lot of them, like, they're folkloric teachers and they only want to teach folklore and they want to present that as like the only legitimate art form. And it's like, but it's not. And it's like, the thing is that you can be artistic and sexy at the same time. Like, you know, you don't have to be, it's the Madonna prostitute, like, dichotomy. Like, it's the false dichotomy. It's like, you can be an artist and you can be sexy and still be in your power without being a stripper.
But there's nothing wrong with being a stripper.
There's nothing wrong with being a stripper, but the thing is that, you know, to try and completely divorce sexuality from belly dance is just because we're not strippers. Like, that's a false dichotomy. It's like, it's not like you can be it's like you can be a belly dancer or sexy. No. You know, women are sexual creatures. We have sexual agency, and it doesn't always play out as either I'm standing here and I'm dancing or I'm banging you. You know, right. There's much more nuance. And I think that's the problem, is there's not a lot of nuance in a lot of these conversations that are happening.
Yes, I think you're right. I know that for myself, the perspective that I'm coming from is someone who is ardently recovering from purity culture. And that is what the culture that I grew up in, and it's persisted all through into my adulthood. And it caused a a lot of problems for me, a lot of trauma and just stuff that I, at 50, almost 51 years old, I'm still trying to sort through some, you know, the just the shame and things like that. So I am aware that part of why I feel so strongly about this is because of my own issues, you know, and I think it's wrong to not allow women to be sexual creatures when we are, you know. So I recognize that some of my thing is coming at this from that perspective. But at the same time, you know, women are sexual creatures, and so we should be allowed to be.
Well, and the thing is, like, when you watch, like, you know, when you watch Amani Jabril dance, she is sexy. She is sexy, but it's still art and it's still beautiful and it can
Right.
still be, it's, you know, and that's the thing, is like the idea that like either I'm standing here and I'm doing my art or I'm being sex. It's just, that's
Yeah.
so like, because it's the whole idea that I can't stand that, like, I have to be standing on my street, like, you know, if I'm looking ready, like if I'm trying to cross the street and I'm trying to not get harassed, I need to be sitting here with my headphones in. I have to like have my arms crossed. I have to be like in jeans and like a sweater and like just be like this. I'm like, no makeup on, because like if there's anything about me, like if my jeans are too tight, even though I'm wearing a baggy sweater, but they can kind of see the curve of my ass and they're going to harass me. No, like I hate that. It's exhausting. So I don't want to completely divorce myself from, because the thing is too, is that like sometimes you just feel the music and a face that you don't even mean to be sexy comes across and somebody's attracted to it, but that's not me being sexy. That's me just being lost in the music. And I can't help
exactly
what other people are projecting.
That's exactly.
Because somebody thinks that my big ass anime eyes are super hot. Like I can't fucking help that. I'm swearing a lot today, guys. I'm sorry. But
exactly, why does it have to be either or? Why can't art also be, and a lot of people be like, well, I think it's about sensuality instead of sexuality, and that's fine.
That's semantics.
I agree, but I used to be one of those people that said that. So
I know, but it's semantics, and it's people who are, and it comes from, unless you're in a nun's habit or like a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints like prairie dress, you're asking for it. It comes from that attitude and people trying to make it safe for dancers to still perform. So they have this whole thing. I mean, that's what it comes from, is like, you know, trying to stay safe, trying to keep other dancers safe. But I mean, that's just a question of holding men responsible for their own actions.
Yeah.
And that's a community thing. That's not just the dancer telling the guy who slaps her ass in the restaurant, no. That's the restaurant owner saying no. That's everybody else in the restaurant being like, no. That's a whole cultural thing that like one little belly dancer isn't going to solve.
Right. And I would just like to touch on that. Having been the in charge of the dancing at most of the places that had dancing up here in the Antelope Valley, so Adam, who owned Mythos, I appreciated him, and Mark, who owned Pars. Mm-hmm. They had different approaches, but they still had my back. So Adam, if I told him, you know, that dude over at the table in the corner, you know, he tried to touch me inappropriately, Adam would go marching across the middle of the restaurant, like from the kitchen.
But screaming from where he started, what are you doing?
What are you doing? You can't touch the dancer that way. And I loved it. I mean, there were times I was like, I just wanted you to be aware, you know.
But you're also like a little gratified.
Oh, totally. And he would kick them out. He would kick them out right off the bat. Mark would go over and I'd be like, hey, that guy tried to touch me inappropriately at that table. And he would go over and say quietly, he'd be like, you have to be respectful of the dancer. She is an artist. And if you touch her inappropriately or try to touch her inappropriately again, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You know, quietly. And 90% of the time, people, because it was always Americans who were like, ooh, and so they were trying to get away with something. Now, that's very different from Jacob, who ran a restaurant out here who, I mean,
Hideous.
he was hideous. And one of my dancers, one of the patrons, pulled out her skirt, and she was barely old. She was like 18 at the time, and he commented
he reached into her costume and pulled out her thong.
That's what it was. And she tried to tell him, and he was like, oh, he didn't mean anything by it. Needless to say, I didn't even let him know that I wasn't sending any dancers to him anymore. I just stopped.
There was no reason to, because if he didn't have any patrons and he saw the dancer coming, he would just run up to the door and lock it. So that way she couldn't get in the restaurant. He didn't have to pay her.
But he didn't take care of us either.
No, but I mean, and that's the thing, is like, it's not like, I think the summary, I think the gist of what we're saying here is that instead of dancers slut shaming each other and trying to police each other, what we need to do is have each other's back. Because then we can have our conversations about what's authentic dance, what's this, what's appropriate, what's not. But when the rest of the world comes for us, we need to be like, fuck you. You don't touch her. Instead of being like, well, she didn't wear that costume, she didn't dance like that.
Exactly. You very succinctly said what I spent the last half hour saying.
That's what I do. I put buttons on things.
Paid by the word.
But I mean, that's the thing, is like, it's one belly dancer at one restaurant isn't going to make or break the argument. It's a cultural thing. And I mean, it is, because I mean, like, I just start working out a little bit. I can be in my work uniform back when I was working at the athletic club, and the work uniform was like basically khakis and a shirt that I had actually buttoned up to here because it was kind of loose in the collar. So I had the shirt buttoned all the way up and was in a varsity sweater. But if I worked out and saw my glutes were looking particularly good, I couldn't walk 2 blocks to the Starbucks and back without being harassed 5 times. And that isn't, and I'm basically dressed like a high schooler, essentially.
It has nothing to do with what we're wearing. It really doesn't.
No. And it's a cultural, like, you know, and I understand because, like, you know, because belly dance is so associated with sex work, because purity culture and pure fucking Puritans have made anything short of ballet sexy and sexual and asking for it. I mean, that's a greater conversation to have in the society. Yeah. That's an education of society. I don't really see that being on, I mean, I see it on dancers to educate, but I don't really see that being on dancers to, you know, police what look you do, what speed at which you do a hip circle, if you start the hip circle to the back or to the front, so your pelvis is, you know, facing forward first. Like, I don't think that's where the conversation is.
No. And we can talk about very specific things. Like, I'm never going to be okay with a dancer crotching the audience. Like, I'm never going to be okay with that. But I'm also going to just teach my students, all you have to do is angle, and you can still do that back bend. And actually the audience will get more out of it because they'll see your whole body instead of just your crotch. You know, that's like about the whole performance, not just about, I don't want to see your crotch. You know, like, we can still have these very specific conversations about why this is not the best choice. You know, your audience isn't getting the full thing out of it if you just do a back bend with your crotch straight to them. That's not a good choice. Not because you're a slut, but because it just doesn't look good. So, you know, like, we can have very specific conversations about things that, you know, pertain to it, but without slut shaming. Like, oh, well, you're a slut because you crotch the audience. I mean, I've done it and I don't consider myself a slut, but even if I was, you know.
Well, and also I think one of the really important conversations to have around this is because, you know, as was brought up, a lot of, like, the master teachers, native dancers can be guilty of this, especially the ones that are like folklore, because, you know, we were having a conversation about a particular folklore teacher who was a man who runs one of the academies, and told all these girls that he was going to take them on this. And these are all belly dancers. These women all identify as belly dance. Told him that he was going to take them on a trip to Egypt, and they didn't sing a single. They did not see. They went to this. They paid tons of money. Some of them, this is going to be their only time to go to Egypt and see dancing in Egypt. And they didn't see a single belly dancer because for him, he wants to separate certain elements of his culture. I mean, that's not direct slut shaming, but that's like the attitude that can come from. So when we see people being problematic and like, and we feel that they're saying problematic things, call them out on the slut shaming, but like their voices are still important because they're still master teachers. They still have a context for this. And it's like, and the fact of the matter is like, these are attitudes within the culture. I mean, that's part of it too, is just accepting these are attitudes within the culture.
Exactly.
And you can, I mean, I know we're like, you can't cherry pick, but this is a situation in which you can kind of cherry pick, where you can be like, I'm going to be a dancer, I'm going to be as authentic as possible, and I'm going to keep these attitudes exist in mind. But I'm pretty sure I can dance without them, so I'm going to dance without them.
I think that kind of comes down to those of us in the West need to really be grateful that we can perform without community, like the general public community. With there's going to be slut shaming, and that's the worst of it.
True. Yeah.
Like that's the worst of it, and that sucks, and we shouldn't be doing that. But that's the worst of it. We're not going to lose our jobs or anything like that, or have our family reject us.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, like, and so I think that is also something that we should definitely, like, that is also something that we should be keeping in mind, is how fortunate we are in the West that we can do things that they may or may not be able to do in the cultures of origin. In other words, this is not black and white. This is all very nuanced and has all kinds of layers, and that's why we should be talking about it instead of yelling.
And when the dancers in the culture, who are over there say like, this is bullshit and fuck this slut shaming, like absolutely, like, share the crap out of them, help amplify their voices, everything like that, support the hell out of them. But I mean, it's like what we said with Mahagana. It's like, this is we can't, it's very tempting to say, oh, well, going back to the Mahagana issue, because we see parallels between what's going on over there now and the attitudes towards it and everything else, and we see parallels to the rise of R&B and rap and hip hop here in the States, and with the whole like parental guidance stickers on CDs and everything like that, like we see parallels. So it's very tempting to think, oh, well, we went through that, we moved past it. It's a state of being to evolve past. It's not, that's what happened with white savior complex and social Darwinism, was that we thought that when we decided to start colonizing Africa, because they weren't industrialized as we were, we saw it as a phase to move through and move past. And so therefore we saw them as inferior. And when you see cultures as inferior and that they need to get on your level, this is problematic. This is super problematic because there are certain like technology phases to anyway, but the reason why we have diversity in culture is because not everything is black and white, and not every thing is something to move through. That's how, that's what causes, that's just evolution. That's what causes diversity, is that because there's not just one way to move through it, and they as a society need to move through it. We need to be grateful that we can do whatever the fuck we want here. And then, if the conversation comes up, maybe point out to some of the people, be like, well, but the girls are dancing to it because, the ladies over there are dancing to it because that's what's being played in the clubs and that's where they work. So they can't not dance to it. Because you're not going to get paid if every time a fucking Mahagana song comes on, you walk off. They'll just find another dancer who will dance to it.
Yeah, it's true.
And so that's, that's the thing, is like, there are going to be gigs out here where they really want a particular thing, and you don't have to take that gig, but they'll find a dancer who will.
Yeah. Everything is always so complicated, and this is this is why, like I said, why I think we need to talk about these things instead of just, you know, yelling at each other, you know.
Right. And I mean, I know that I just said like there needs to be a conversation about it and there needs to be an acceptance of nuance. And then as soon as you said sensuality versus sexuality, I shut that down and said semantics. But there is, I think that's the main thing that we've been missing in these conversations is nuance.
Well, honestly, I believe that one of the big things that we've been missing is listening.
Oh, word.
And I'm just going to put a plug for our channel. That's one of the things that I really love about the fact that we have that we are interviewing all of these people, and we are interviewing all kinds of diverse people and people that have said things that I definitely don't agree with and things that I'm like, oh, that really makes sense, because it shows me where people are coming from. It's been fantastic for me to really hear all of the different viewpoints and voices. And so we can still think that this person is right and that person is wrong. But I think we still should be listening to everybody.
We do show when there are conflicting, if we happen to interview two guests and they have conflicting viewpoints on the same topic, we show that. I mean, we showed Kat Ellen's take on the use of tribal within the Fat Chance Belly Dance group. And then we also showed Falazans, and they have conflicting points of view, but we show both because there are 2 points of view. They both have good arguments, and it's up to you to decide how you feel about it.
Right. Exactly.
So.
All right. On that note, it is 12:37. So that's it. No more talking.
Oh, I wanted to say really quick too, because we have fans, especially Sergey. What's up, Sergey? Who talks to us in the comments on the live YouTube, and like I went back and I saw them, and I just wanted to say that we really appreciate you guys that are talking to us in the chat. It's just that our technology doesn't allow us to always see what's going on in the comments, but we appreciate you. We do go back and we watch it afterwards, the live chat. So just want to say what's up. And we love you guys a lot. So thank you for talking to us in the comments.
Yes, thank you.
Anywho, we will see you all next week. The interview is a surprise.
Stephanie.
Do we have more than one interview tomorrow?
No.
Oh, well then it's Stephanie.
Stephanie Fatou. Did she pronounce it Fatou?
That's an excellent
asked her
question.
this so many times and I can't remember. And I'm sorry, Stephanie.
We will have an answer for you on that next week. We're interviewing her tomorrow.
We're interviewing her tomorrow. And she used to live here in LA, and I love her dancing, and she's just an all around rad person. So I'm looking forward to that. So
yeah, that's going to be a fabulous interview. So anyway, I am Perizaad.
I'm Faizeh.
And this has been this week's Rocks Talks. We will see y'all next week. Masalama.